I once heard an old nurse say that some rooms remember pain. At the time, I thought it was just one of those things older staff said to scare the new ones. But now, I think about those words every night. I used to work the night shift at a mid-sized hospital just outside of town. It was mostly quiet, except for the usual chaos of emergencies and restless patients. But there was one part of the hospital no one talked about, a wing that had been closed down after a fire over 10 years ago. Room 323. I will never forget that number. After the fire, the whole hallway was sealed off, not just shut down, I mean locked, chained, and left to rot. But for some reason, room 323 still showed up on the nurse call panel. No one ever fixed it. It would light up sometimes, like someone was pressing the call button. Every nurse who worked nights knew about it, but we all brushed it off, like a glitch. I used to laugh at how creeped out some of the others got. I mean, who would believe a sealed room could still be calling for help? One night, I was working a double shift because another nurse had called in sick. I was already tired when I started, but by 2 a.m., I was running on coffee and autopilot. I was sitting at the nurse station, writing notes, when the call panel chimed. I looked up and saw it. Room 323. I stared at it for a second, and my stomach turned a little. I got up, walked over, and reset the alert. That should have been it. But 5 minutes later, it lit up again. I reset it again, then again. By the fourth time, I started to feel uneasy. I called maintenance, asked them if someone was maybe working back there, or if the wiring was acting up. The guy laughed and told me no one had been in that wing for years. There was no power going into those rooms. I asked how the light could still turn on then. He didn't have an answer, just told me to ignore it, and hung up. I tried to shake it off, but I could not stop staring at that blinking light. I remember telling myself, maybe someone messed up the wiring. Maybe it was feeding off another circuit, but it did not explain what happened next. Around 3 a.m., I went to check on an elderly patient down the hall. As I walked past the main corridor leading to the sealed wing, I heard something soft, faint, but clear. It was the sound of the call bell, the actual sound it makes from inside the room, not just on the panel. It came from the direction of room 323. I froze. That hallway had been blocked off with a heavy steel door ever since I started, but that night, the door was open. I stood there, heart pounding. I thought maybe security had come through for some reason and forgotten to close it. But when I called down to the front desk, they said no one had been assigned to that area. I walked slowly toward the open doorway. The hall was dark, and everything smelled like smoke and mold. The wallpaper was peeling, the lights were dead, but room 323's door was slightly ajar. I told myself I just needed to look inside, confirm it was empty, and report the issue. That was my job, right? So I pushed the door open. The room looked exactly like the photos I had seen in the incident report years ago. Blackened walls, a broken hospital bed, burn marks on the floor and ceiling. But what made my blood run cold was the nurse call button. It was glowing red, just like it does when a patient presses it. I walked over to it, not even thinking at this point, just trying to process what I was seeing. There was no electricity in that room, none, and yet the button was lit, and I could hear the soft buzzing of the call sound. I reached out to touch it, and the second I did, the temperature dropped. Not like the AC kicked in. I mean, I could see my breath in the air. The walls around me seemed to pulse, like they were breathing. I turned to leave, but something was standing in the corner. I didn't see it at first. It blended with the burned shadows, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw the outline of a woman, a patient gown, blackened skin, hair hanging down like it had melted. Her eyes were open, but not blinking, just staring at me. I could not move. I could not scream. I felt something crawl inside my chest, like cold fingers wrapping around my heart. She opened her mouth slowly, and all I heard was a soft whisper that sounded like "help me." Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. A few nurses were around me, asking what had happened. I told them the truth, and they all looked at each other with the same kind of fear I had only seen once before, when I was a child and watched my grandmother die with her eyes wide open. They said they found me passed out in the hallway, just outside the sealed wing. The security footage showed me walking into the hallway, but the footage cut to static right before I reached room 323. Every time, no one could explain it. The hospital administration tried to say I had a breakdown from stress. They offered me time off. I took it, but I never went back. Months later, I met an older nurse at a grocery store. We started talking, and when I mentioned I used to work the night shift, her face changed. She asked if I had ever heard of room 323. I said yes. She told me she had been there the night of the fire. The woman who died in that room had pressed her call light for help while the fire was spreading, but the alarm system failed. No one came. She burned alive, calling for help that never came. The call light stayed on until the power died, and ever since it turns back on, like she is still waiting. I still dream about that room, about that woman, and sometimes when I am alone at night, I hear a soft buzzing sound in the silence. I will never forget what I saw in room 323, because I do not think it wanted help. I think it wanted me to stay. Hospitals are strange places at night. When the lights dim and the halls go quiet, time seems to slow down, and even the softest sounds feel louder. I used to think it was just my imagination, the way shadows played tricks, or how silence made every creak sound like a whisper. But there was something different about the wing I worked in. I had been a night nurse for years, and while I had seen my share of odd things, there was one room that never sat right with me. Room 412. It was supposed to be empty, had been for years. The administration said it was no longer in use, and the door was always locked, marked with a small out-of-service sign that no one ever touched. It sat at the end of the hall like a forgotten memory, ignored by staff, skipped during rounds, but the patients in nearby rooms never forgot it. Not really. They always talked about the screaming. It started small, little things. One night, Mrs. Darby in 410 rang her call bell 3 times in 1 hour, panicked and shaking, saying she could not sleep with all that crying. I asked what she meant, and she told me there was a girl in the next room, sobbing, begging someone to help her. When I reminded her the room was empty, she gave me a strange look and said, "She does not know that." I smiled politely, assumed it was confusion, or maybe a side effect of her medication, and gently calmed her down. But the next night, Mr. Levins in 414 said the same thing. Then another patient, always around 2 or 3 in the morning, always the same story, screaming, crying, the sound of fists hitting walls, but I never heard anything, at least not at first. Curiosity got the best of me. One night during my break, I walked to the end of the hall and stood outside room 412, just stood there, listening, my ears strained in the silence, and for a while, there was nothing but the low hum of the vents. I almost turned away. Then I heard it, a soft thud, a second one, then silence again. It was like someone inside had just hit the wall once or twice. I checked the door, still locked. When I leaned close, I thought I heard breathing, but when I stepped back, the hallway was empty behind me. I was completely alone. That was the first night I realized something was wrong. The next few shifts, I avoided that part of the hallway. I made sure my rounds ended before I got close to the door. But then came the night I could not ignore it anymore. I was updating charts at the nurse station when I heard a scream, loud, piercing, like someone being hurt. But I jumped out of my chair and rushed down the hallway, my feet pounding the floor. As I got closer, I could tell it was coming from room 412. I reached the door, tried the handle, still locked. I banged on it, called out, but the screaming stopped instantly, like it had never happened. I stood there, heart pounding, unsure what to do. Security came, used the master key, and opened the door. The room was dark, cold and empty, just a stripped bed and old wallpaper peeling off the corners, nothing else. But when I looked at the wall across from the bed, I froze. Someone had scratched something into the paint, dozens of small lines, like tally marks, and right beneath them, one word, help. It looked fresh. I asked my supervisor if anyone had been assigned to that room. She said no. It was sealed off years ago after a patient died in there. A young woman, mentally unstable, they said. She had been admitted after trying to take her own life, became violent, said she heard voices, screamed every night. Staff sedated her over and over. One night, no one responded to her cries. She choked on her vomit, died alone. The nurse on duty had quit right after. The room was closed after that. When I asked why the door was still wired to the nurse panel, my supervisor just shrugged and told me to ignore it. Maintenance would fix it eventually, but the patients kept hearing her. The screaming never stopped. I started having nightmares, the kind that felt more like memories. In one of them I was inside room 412, standing at the foot of the bed. A girl was lying there, face turned away, sobbing. When I tried to move, I could not. My feet felt rooted to the floor. She slowly turned her head toward me, eyes black and empty. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just that look, that expression, a mix of pain, anger, and something else, desperation. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart racing like I had just run for miles. Every night the dream returned, more vivid than the last. I went back to the room on my final night. I had made up my mind to transfer out. I could not take it anymore. But before I left, I wanted to see the room one last time. I waited until the hallway was empty, took the master key from the station drawer. But when I unlocked the door, the air that came out felt colder than anything I had ever felt inside that building. I stepped in slowly. The bed was gone. The room was stripped bare, but the walls were covered now. Not just tally marks. Words, hundreds of them, scribbled, scratched, carved in over and over again. The same sentence. I screamed. No one came. Over and over, like she had been trying to make someone listen. As I backed out of the room, I heard a faint voice behind me say, "You hear me now?" And the door slammed shut on its own. I quit the next morning, told them I was burned out, took a desk job far away from hospitals. I still hear screams sometimes, in the middle of the night, even though I live alone, even though there is no one on the other side of my wall. But I know what I heard in that room, what others still hear. Room 412 is not empty. Not really. Not for her. Not for the ones who did not listen. In nursing school, they teach you about the science of medicine, the art of care, and the importance of empathy. But there are things they do not prepare you for. Things that lurk in the quiet corners of hospitals, in the spaces where the sterile light does not quite reach. When I first started working the night shift on the 3rd floor of St. Mary's Hospital, I was eager to make a difference, to be the nurse who could handle anything. The 3rd floor was a med-surg unit, a place for patients recovering from surgery or battling chronic illnesses. It was a routine floor, or so I thought. But there was one bed, bed 3, that the other nurses seemed to avoid assigning. At first, I did not think much of it. Superstitions run rampant in hospitals, and I figured it was just another one of those things. But then I started noticing the pattern. It began subtly. A patient would be admitted and placed in bed 3, often someone with a minor condition or on the mend. The first night would pass without incident. By the second night, they would begin to deteriorate. Complaints of chest pain, difficulty breathing, or sudden confusion. Despite our best efforts, by the third night, they would code and pass away. It happened once, then again, and again. Each time the doctors were baffled. There was no medical explanation for the rapid decline. Autopsies revealed nothing. It was as if the life had simply been drained from them. The staff began to whisper about bed 3, calling it cursed. Some refused to work in that room. Others would double up on rounds, hoping to catch whatever was causing the decline before it was too late. But no matter what we did, the outcome was always the same. I remember one patient vividly. Mr. Thompson was a jovial man in his 60s, admitted for a routine appendectomy. He was placed in bed 3. The surgery went well, and he was expected to be discharged in a few days. The first night, he was cheerful, cracking jokes with the staff. The second night, he complained of a crushing weight on his chest, though all tests came back normal. By the third night, he was gone. I was the one who found him, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. The room felt colder than usual, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow linger in the corner. I blinked, and it was gone. After Mr. Thompson's death, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with bed 3. I decided to dig into the hospital's records, looking for any clue that might explain the deaths. What I found chilled me to the bone. Years ago, before it was a med-surg unit, the third floor had been a psychiatric ward. Bed 3's room had been used for patients in crisis, those deemed a danger to themselves or others. One patient, a young woman named Eleanor, had been admitted after a suicide attempt. She was kept in that room, restrained for her safety. The records indicated that she would often scream at night about a dark figure that watched her from the corner. The staff dismissed it as hallucinations. One night, the screaming stopped. When the nurse on duty checked on her, she was gone. The room was empty, restraints undone. They searched the hospital, but she was never found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The more I read, the more I felt a growing dread. Could it be that Eleanor never left, that her spirit remained trapped in that room, taking the lives of those who slept in her bed? I knew I had to do something. I couldn't stand by and watch more innocent people die. I decided to spend a night in bed 3. Maybe, just maybe, I could confront whatever was causing this. I waited until my shift ended, then slipped into the room. The bed felt cold, the air heavy. I lay there in the dark, listening to the hum of the hospital. Hours passed, and just as I was about to drift off, I felt a pressure on my chest, growing heavier by the second. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Panic surged through me as I opened my eyes and saw her. Eleanor was there, standing over me, her eyes hollow, her face twisted in anguish. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I mustered all my strength and whispered, "Eleanor, it's okay, you're safe now." Her expression softened, and the pressure lifted. She began to fade, and as she did, I heard a faint whisper, "Thank you." The room felt lighter, warmer. From that night on, bed 3 was just another bed. Patients recovered without incident, and the whispers of the curse faded. But I will never forget Eleanor, the pain in her eyes, and the lesson that some souls just need to be heard, to be acknowledged. Hospitals are places of healing, but they are also places of suffering. of unfinished stories. And sometimes, those stories linger, waiting for someone to listen. Some stains are more than just marks on a floor. When I first transferred to night duty at a small regional hospital, I thought the worst part would be the silence. Long stretches of nothing, the occasional monitor beep, maybe a lonely patient pressing their call button for a glass of water. But that silence has weight. It holds things, stories, secrets, and for room 209, the silence carried something darker. It started with a stain, a dark red blotch near the far wall of the room. It looked like dried blood the first time I saw it, but when I mentioned it to housekeeping, they said it had already been cleaned twice that week. Still, I watched them scrub it again. Strong bleach, gloves, even a floor polisher. The tile was spotless, but the next night, during rounds, the stain had returned, in the exact same spot, the same size and shape. At first, no one took it seriously. Nurses joked about the floor bleeding, saying things like, "Guess she is back again," or "Must be a vampire in the vents." I laughed with them, trying not to feel the chills on my arms every time I stepped into that room. It never appeared during the day, only after midnight, and always when the room was empty. We avoided assigning patients there whenever possible, but hospitals do not always have that luxury. The first time I had a patient in room 209 was a man recovering from a minor surgery. He was healthy, stable, and in good spirits. I checked on him around 11 that night. Everything was normal, but when I returned just before 2 in the morning, he was pale and sweating. The stain was back, only this time it looked fresh. The man swore he saw someone standing at the corner of the room, a woman crying, bent over like she was in pain. I told the charge nurse, and she just nodded slowly, like she had been expecting it. That was the night I learned the room's history. Years ago, a woman had been rushed into the hospital after attempting to end her life. She had lost too much blood. The staff tried to stabilize her, but she died right there on the floor of room 209, alone. For a while, they kept the room sealed off, but over time, as space ran out, it was reopened. Since then, that stain kept returning. No matter how often it was scrubbed or what chemical was used, by the next night, it would be back, always in the same spot. And anyone who stayed in that room for more than a night would report the same thing. A crying woman, the sound of footsteps, a feeling of crushing sadness. Curiosity got the better of me one night. I waited until my shift ended and quietly stayed behind. I entered room 209 just before midnight, pulled up a chair, and waited. The light above flickered a few times, but I told myself it was old wiring. The air grew colder, heavy, like walking into a freezer. Around 1:40 a.m., I saw the stain begin to spread across the floor in real time. It was slow, like something soaking upward from beneath the tiles, and then I heard it, the sobbing. Low at first, but filled with pain. I wanted to move, to run, but I stayed. I whispered, "I hear you," because I did not know what else to say. And that was when I saw her. A figure took shape in the corner, not entirely solid, more like a shadow that had forgotten how to fade. She was holding her stomach, blood running between her fingers, her mouth opened, and even though no sound came out, I could feel the scream in my bones. I could not breathe. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone. The air shifted. The stain began to fade before my eyes, until only the tiles remained. That moment changed everything. I knew then that it was not about scaring anyone. She was trapped in the last moment of her life, replaying it over and over, trying to be seen, to be helped, and no one had ever stayed long enough to understand that. The next morning, I went straight to my supervisor and told her everything. I expected to be laughed at, or warned to keep quiet, but she looked at me, serious and calm, and said, "You are not the first." After that, we made a quiet change. We placed a thick rug over the area. No one mentioned it out loud, but the staff understood. The stain never returned. Patients still said they heard things, soft crying, footsteps late at night, but no one reported seeing her again. No one died unexpectedly. Maybe it was the rug. Maybe it was being acknowledged. Maybe it was finally being heard. Hospitals are full of pain, fear, and sometimes regret. Not every story ends in healing. Some stories linger, waiting for someone to notice. Room 209 was one of those stories. I still work night shifts, and I still pass that room. Every time I do, I slow down just a little. I listen, because somewhere in the silence, there is always a voice trying to speak. Some rooms never go quiet, even when no one is left inside. I used to think hospitals were only scary when they were full of sick people, full of pain and struggle. But I was wrong. Sometimes the silence is worse. I have been a nurse in the ICU for over 8 years, and I have seen people come back from the brink of death and others slip away when we least expected it. But nothing has ever shaken me like what happened in room 6. It was sealed off after a code blue that went terribly wrong when a young woman passed away suddenly during a routine overnight observation. It was not a violent death or anything dramatic. Her heart just stopped. No warning, no cause, nothing we could find. After that, the room sat empty. Management said it was under maintenance, but we knew better. Nurses talked. We always do. We said the room had a feel to it, like the air inside never moved, like the shadows stayed longer than they should. At first it was small things that caught our attention. The curtains would be drawn one moment and slightly open the next. We thought maybe the air vents were to blame, or that someone on staff was going in without logging their visits, but the doors were locked. I checked myself. Then came the lights. The motion sensor lights in that ICU room were top of the line, meant to save power and only turn on when someone walked in, yet they would flicker on and off at odd hours, even though the room was empty and locked from the outside. One night, I was finishing paperwork at the central station when I noticed the light in room 6 come on. It was 3:14 a.m. I remember the time clearly, because the station clock ticked so loudly in the silence. I thought maybe security had gone in, so I called down to ask. No one had. The camera outside the room showed nothing, just a still hallway. I tried to brush it off, told myself it was a glitch. But then it happened again, the next night. Same time, same flicker. I mentioned it to another nurse, Linda, who had been at the hospital even longer than me. Her face went pale. She said, without looking at me, "That room is not empty." She told me that after the girl died, the cleaning staff refused to go back in. One of them had seen something moving behind the curtain when no one was inside, and not just once, multiple times. It looked like someone standing behind it, swaying gently like they were trying to get attention. The hospital quietly switched cleaning shifts around so no one would have to go into room 6 alone. But none of that was in the official reports. It never. I did not believe it fully until I saw it with my own eyes. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I stayed late, waited until the ICU was quiet, and then stood just outside room 6. The light was off. The curtain inside was closed. I held my breath and watched. At first nothing happened. Then, the light flicked on without a sound. The curtain twitched, just slightly. Then again, like someone brushing against it from the inside. There was no airflow in that room, no draft, no movement. My skin crawled. I walked away fast, pretending like I had seen nothing. But my heart was racing. I did not tell anyone. What would I even say? 2 weeks later, A decision was made to reopen room 6. A new ICU patient was assigned there. It was unavoidable. The unit was at full capacity, and we needed every bed. The patient, an older man recovering from a heart procedure, was calm and stable. Nothing about his condition was alarming, but he died on his second night. No warning, no struggling, he just stopped breathing. I was the one who found him, and the strangest part was that his eyes were open, wide open, like he had seen something awful. After his body was removed, I went back in to clean the monitors. I tried to avoid looking at the curtain, but I felt like it was watching me. When I finally glanced over, it shifted, just once, as if someone was leaning out, only to hide again when I looked. I broke down that night. In the break room, Linda found me. She said I was not crazy. She told me about the girl who had died in that room. She had come in after a car accident, not seriously injured, just some bruises and a mild concussion, but she had been scared. She kept whispering about someone watching her from the corner. A woman with dark hair. We thought it was just the concussion. Hallucinations are common, but now I wonder if she really saw something. Maybe something that had already been there, something that needed others to see it. The hospital never spoke about the deaths. We were told not to link them. Accidents happen, that is what they say. But I know better. After the second patient died, room 6 was closed again. Not officially, just quietly taken off the list. Staff avoid it. Even now, the light still flickers at night. The curtain still shifts, like someone is waiting for their turn, waiting for someone to step inside and stay long enough to be noticed. I will never forget the feeling I had when I looked into that room and saw the shadow behind the curtain move when it should not have. It was not just a shadow. It was a presence, something that wants to be seen, and when it is, it does not let go. Now every time I walk past room 6, I hold my breath. I do not look at the curtain. I do not look at the light, because I am afraid that if I see it again, it will see me back, and next time, it might not let me leave.